Hi guys, I'm Swamp Fox Mike, and this video is about sighting in your rifle. We've done some videos in the past on how to sight in pistol dots and such, but today's all about the big guys. So I have my precision AR here with a Kentucky long 2-12 and a Kingslayer on a 45-degree mount, one of our hostile engagement mounts. And I'm at the bench rest section of my shooting range today. Now, just because I'm shooting bench rest doesn't mean I'm retired. I'm still working hard for you guys, but we have to shoot from the bench, and we're going to shoot as supported as we possibly can. You'll see some guys will buy those lead sleds, the giant contraption that you strap your gun down. It's kind of big and bulky and expensive, and you got to tote it around in the truck everywhere. And I want to show you, you don't have to get one of those. If you want to get one, they're fine. They're worth it. It's not a bad deal, but I do just fine with these little Caldwell bags. These are sold as an AR-15 bag set, but you can see I've got my AK here that I took to Kalash Bash, and they're kind of just odd shapes. This one's an L shape, and this one's like a block. And you can make it work with a variety of rifles without having to use any other support. So I could sight in my AK if I wanted to today off of these bags and be very well supported and have good success. In fact, that is how I sight in rifles like this that don't have bipods. The AR has a bipod on it, but the bipod is attached to the free-floating handguard, so it's not going to mess up the barrel dynamics. If you have a bipod that attaches directly to the barrel, you're going to have to choose whether you want to zero with the bipod on or with it off. It's going to hit differently depending on whether you have that bipod attached or not. And I'm going to show you something kind of similar to that here in a minute. So it's time to get sighted in. I'm going to get things reset. The first thing I'm going to do to sight in an AR is take the rifle apart. Okay, so it's a few minutes later, and what I've done is I've taken the lower off of my upper. So the lower's sitting here, bolt carrier's out, and I've got this set up just as if it was the rifle on the bipod in front and the bag in the back. But what I'm doing is I'm boresighting. So I look through the barrel of the gun, the physical barrel, and I peer through here, and I look and I arrange this until I can see the target with my naked eye through the barrel at 100 yards. Just the middle of the target, roughly, there's no magnification or anything. And then without touching the upper at all, I'm going to make sure I can see the target, come up, and then I'm going to look through the optic and see where the optic's pointing. And then I can fiddle with my adjustments roughly, coarsely, until I have the optic pointing at the target and the barrel pointing at the target. Is this precise at all? No. Will it get me on paper? Yes, and that's the most important thing, especially if you're going to start shooting at 100 yards. You need to make sure that you're at least on paper and that you're being safe and not skying rounds over the berm, right? So if I was shooting the AK today instead of the AR, I wouldn't do that. You can't bore sight an AK because of the shape of the receiver. So I would have started up very close, maybe even at just 25 yards, and made sure that I was on paper at 25 and had coarse adjustments done up close, and then moved to 100 yards. Safety first, guys. Okay guys, so it's almost time to start shooting. I want to point out a couple of things. First of all, I've got my ocular set for my eye, and I made a little paint dab there with, actually it's some green fingernail polish, and that tells me where my favorite ocular position is for my eye. That's handy because if I want to let somebody else at the range shoot my gun, they can play with it and, they like it that way or they like it that way, and they didn't screw up my setting, or if it gets bumped or something, I always know that green mark is where my ocular is set up for my eye. I did that in advance. If I hadn't done it in advance, I would want to do it before I started shooting. Magnification. Sometimes people ask, what's the best magnification to shoot at? Well, if the optic has magnification, I'm going to zero at 100 yards today. I'm going to use some magnification because it's a luxury and it helps. You don't necessarily need it. Obviously, people shoot just fine with red dots and everything, but if the optic has magnification, I'm going to use some. On the other hand, I often don't go all the way up to full magnification. There's such a thing as too much mag at just 100 yards or 50 yards. And on the other hand too, some optics, they have a really tight eye box. The high magnification scopes, you get to 24 power, 25 power, 30 power, the eye box gets tight, right? And then the optic gets harder to use. At 100 yards, I don't want anything to be hard to do. I want this to be as easy as possible. I want to be as comfortable as possible behind the gun. Fortunately, Kentucky long 2-12 here has a really good eye box even at maximum magnification. So screw it, I'm going to put that sucker to 12 even at 100 yards and just cheat it as much as I can. Lastly, parallax. I'm not going to get into a big discussion about what parallax is for today. I'm just going to point out this scope has adjustable side focus parallax. It's marked with yardage there. I'm going to put it at 100, so my parallax is set correctly to 100 yards. We don't need to overthink that. Let's go shooting. All right, behind the rifle, and the point I want to make here is I'm very well supported with a front-loaded bipod. I've got my bag of choice in the back. I need to be as comfortable as possible, as supported as possible, and the gun should be completely on target, exactly where I want to hit before I pull the trigger. I should be extremely still. I don't want to have any distractions. If there's anything that's bothering me, there's sun in my eye, gosh, I gotta go pee, whatever those things are, take care of those things. So you can focus on the task at hand and just focus on making quality trigger presses, because we're trying to shoot the tightest group that we possibly can. All right. The other thing is that I'm gonna hold this gun the same way the entire time. So if I shoot some of my group this way, and then I hold the mag well for a while, and then I hold the forend for a while, it's not that the gun is going to shoot any differently, but the guy behind the trigger is holding it differently, and that can introduce an unwelcome variable where I didn't hit in the same place, not because of anything that the gun did, but simply because I was inconsistent in how I was addressing the rifle. So I'm going to hold the rear stock with my left hand like that. I can actually see my heartbeat in the reticle, which is a good sign. I'm off safe, and I'm going to pay attention to my breathing here and stop talking. Another thing I want to point out is I'm wearing these Walker's in-ear protectors today for hearing protection. Guys, these are worth every penny. If you get a deal on one for, Black Friday, Christmas coming up, do it. They're worth every penny. I really greatly prefer these when shooting rifles to the old earmuffs, because look where my ear is. This stock with its heightened cheek comb here, this cheek riser, it often will push a cup off of my ear, and then I worry about it. It's one thing that's a distraction, and it's worrying me, right? These Walkers are absolutely fantastic. They work great. The hearing amplification is great. Another good shot.
My Halloween
So I fired my first string, and now I'm going to look through my spotting scope and see where I hit. Actually, what we're going to do is I'm going to walk down range with the camera and show you where I hit, but what I would actually do is look through my spotting scope. These things are not a necessity, but boy, are they a luxury. Swamp Fox does not make a spotting scope yet. I'm really looking forward to changing that someday. It is on the list of things we want to do eventually, but the spotting scope will save you having to coordinate with all the other shooters on the line and wait like a half hour between strings for them to finish what they're doing, and then we call a cold range and all walk down together. It can save you a ton of time, and if you have a partner that you're shooting with that can call out corrections to you, you can save a bunch of time and some ammo and get sighted in a much shorter amount of time. So if you can, get yourself a spotting scope. If you can't, well, I guess we got to hoof it down range. All right, so here we are at 100 yards, and you'll notice that I actually shot 6 shots, and in between my 2 groups of 3, I put a silencer, suppressor, on my gun. So I did that to prove a point to you. Here's my first 3, they're in the shoot and see, and then my second 3 are all the way down here, because that silencer is quite heavy, and it actually pulls the barrel down a little bit with its weight. So I'm about 6 inches low with the silencer on versus just shooting loud. The point that I want to make is zero your rifle in the configuration in which you intend to shoot it. Because if I'm 6 inches low at 100 yards, then I'm in really bad trouble at 200 yards. If I zero the rifle the loud way, and then I just go out, oh, I'm going to go hog hunting, and I put the silencer on the gun to go hog hunting, well, I'm significantly low. So zero your rifle in the way that you intend to shoot it, Okay, so we're going to focus on doing it the loud way. I want to shoot this rifle in competition, and I need the timer to be able to hear it. So I'm going to zero it loud without the suppressor on it. So here's my group. These boxes are 1 inch each. So I am 1, 2, 3 inches low, roughly, and I'm 1, 2, 3 inches, and maybe a little bit more than 3 inches to the left. So I need to come right 3, I need to come up 3 inches.
Before I start making adjustments to my Kentucky Long, I want to show you a potential shortcut that can help you out if you're in a hurry or if you aren't sure of the click values of your scope. This is a cell phone pic that I took after shooting my first groups, and you can see what I've done is point the center of my reticle at my group's point of impact. The crosshairs are centered 3 inches down and 3 inches left of the target. Now, if I can strap the rifle down really tight or otherwise adjust my turrets without moving the rifle at all, I want to move the crosshair to the center of the target with my turrets. That will change my point of impact 3 inches up and 3 inches right, exactly where I want to go. The advantage of doing it this way is I didn't have to pull out my calculator and do any math at all, or even think about MOA or MRADs, and this technique works at any distance that I want to zero my rifle at. The disadvantages are that it really only works with optics that give you enough magnification to point the scope exactly where your previous shots hit. This is a pretty easy method to use with a 12 power magnification scope like Kentucky Long, but let's say I was zeroing a red dot at 100 yards instead. I would have a really hard time just seeing 3 inches of offset well enough to make a correct adjustment. Also, this technique relies on the rifle being absolutely still while you make your adjustments. Even one little wiggle from the rifle stock and it's all over and you'll have to try again. Do it right and it's a very efficient way to make your first adjustment. Do it wrong and it's a waste of both time and ammo, but I at least wanted to show you guys that it's a well-known technique. We now return you to your regularly scheduled range trip already in progress.
Okay, you guys, we were 3 inches down and 3 inches to the left. So I need to come up 3 inches and I need to come right 3 inches. You can see this is a mil or MRAD optic, milliradians. So one click is 1/10 of a mil. That is going to be 0.36 inches at 100 yards. I'm not going to get into a big discussion about what milliradians are right now, but basically 3 clicks is going to move us a little bit more than an inch. If we need to move 3 inches, I'm going to do 9 clicks total, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 is how I like to count it out. So I go inch, inch, inch. You can see the markings on the optic here. The U and the arrow is point of impact. Don't freak yourself out and trick yourself worrying about which direction the reticle's moving inside the scope. Forget that. Just remember the direction indicated on the optic, and this is pretty standard across the industry. It's not just Swamp Fox. The direction indicated here is your point of impact. So I'm hitting low, and I need to move 3 inches up. My point of impact needs to go up. So I'm going to pull up on this turret to unlock it, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. That's 1 inch. 1, 2, 3. That's 2 inches. 1, 2, 3. That's 3 inches, and I'm going to push it back down and lock it in place. I'm going to do the same thing here on my windage. You can't really see it right now, but I pulled it out. I'm going to go right, which is counterclockwise. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and push it back in. So now I have made my adjustments, and we're going to shoot another group.
You saw me count clicks as I turned the turret on the outside of the scope, but how does that change where my rifle is aimed? Let's stop for a second and take a look at exactly what's happening inside the scope when we make our click adjustments. Here's our Kentucky Long if we cut it in half. I think these renderings are pretty cool. On the right is our big objective lens that faces the target. On the left is the ocular lens that's facing our eyeball. You can see the throw fin I used to change magnification, and in the middle of the scope is the elevation turret. If we zoom in a little bit more, I'll highlight the erector assembly in green for you. There we go. The outer scope tube is what we attach our scope rings to, and the erector is a smaller tube hiding inside it. The erector slides back and forth when you turn the magnification ring. The further the erector tube can slide forwards and backwards, the more change in magnification you get. That's what we call the erector ratio. But what I want to show you today is how the inside of the elevation turret is pressing against the end of the erector assembly, holding it in place vertically. The windage turret holds it in place horizontally, and the entire assembly is held under tremendous tension by a very strong spring located at a 45-degree angle opposite of the turrets. And basically, Think of the elevation turret here as a very finely made, complicated bolt or screw that's pushing against the erector assembly. When you turn it in one direction, the screw pushes downwards and changes where the erector assembly tube is pointed. In very small increments, that changes where the scope appears to be looking when you see through it. When you turn the turret in the opposite direction, it essentially unscrews and allows that strong spring to push the erector assembly back up. That's essentially how your windage and elevation adjustments work. When we sight in our rifle, all we're really doing is getting that erector assembly to look at the exact same spot where the bullets are hitting at our chosen distance. The math of how all those lenses work to make that happen is very complicated. I don't have a degree in optical engineering, and I don't truly understand it. It's enough for me to follow the markings on the outside of the scope and remember that they reference point of impact. Counterclockwise to move my point of impact up, clockwise to move my point of impact down. Okay, now it's time to shoot my second group and see how my point of impact has changed. Once again, I shoot slowly, I shoot deliberately, I'm trying to shoot the tightest group that I possibly can.
That didn't suck. All right, so 1, 2, 3, I've got 2 out of 3 right in the middle and one that's a little bit to the right. That's about as good as I can shoot, you know. Woo! I'd like to thank my sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. I'm just kidding. I'm gonna leave this alone. So, you know, maybe if I was gonna be super picky about it, I might go 1 click to the left for good luck, but 2 out of 3 within the orange, I'm calling it good. I'm calling this rifle sighted in.
Okay, so I'm happy with my second group and the rifle is sighted in. Let's take one more look at what actually happened when I made my scope adjustments. I took a look at my first shot group and decided it was about 3 inches low and about 3 inches left. Hey look, it's a Glock! I chose a spot roughly in the middle of my first group and I counted up 1, 2, 3 inches. Then from that spot, I counted right 1, 2, 3 more inches. I was able to do this because the target is broken up into square inches nicely, but if I didn't have this sort of target handy, I could just use a tape measure. That works too. Knowing that 1 click is a bit more than 1/3 of an inch, that makes 3 clicks a bit more than 1 inch. No big deal. To move 3 inches, I just counted off 9 clicks as you saw, and I had pretty good luck. But if you look closely at the math, by the time I got to 9 clicks, that little remainder had added up to almost 1/4 of an inch extra adjustment distance. Is that why my final group is a little bit off to the right? Maybe. I'm showing you this so you can see the real math and how it relates to my quick estimation at the range. At just 100 yards and only a handful of clicks, I was okay with estimating, rounding down, and I still got pretty close. But if I was shooting at longer distance, or if my first group had been way off and I needed to make bigger adjustments, breaking out the calculator app on my cell phone or using a ballistic calculator like Strelic Pro would have been the smart call for me to do. There's an alternative method that's possible to use if you don't have an inch mark target, but you do have a spotting scope with a reticle installed in it. Let's say my spotting scope has a mil type reticle in it, which would be nice since my scope is also a mil type scope. Let's mock that up in Photoshop real quick. There's our recce reticle. Now, looking at my first shot group low left and the center of the target a little bit less than 3 mils to the right. Now, I've lost my inch squares, but I can just use the reticle to measure out the same distances. I can forget about inches entirely and just make my adjustments based on my estimation of the distance in pure mils. This technique has the advantage of simplicity. I don't have to worry about any math, but it does require a darn good spotting scope equipped with a proper reticle and the ability to see very clearly what adjustments are needed. If you're working with a spotter to help you make adjustments, make sure you both understand how you will communicate in advance. I've seen some frustrating outcomes due to miscommunication. The spotter says, low left, and the shooter thinks, oh, okay, I need to adjust my scope to go low left, when what the spotter meant was that you missed low and to the left. I personally prefer for my spotter to do all the math for me and call out my adjustments in clicks so I can focus on pure shooting. So in this circumstance, I would want my spotter to say, come up, 9, come right, 9. Just make sure you and your spotter are on the same page, whatever you guys do. Now, I want to show you one more thing regarding zeroing red dots on 45-degree offset mounts.
Guys, I've changed locations because I want to sight this in at 50 yards. I'm going to sight in my backup Kingslayer here using my 50-200 Battle Sight Zero that I talked about in another recent video. If you haven't seen the 50-200 Battle Sight Zero video yet, we'll put a link to it. I think it's worth watching. So when I sight in a 45-degree offset dot like this, I cant the entire rifle so the dot itself is straight up and down, and that makes my adjustments a lot easier. The procedure is exactly the same. I'm going to shoot 3 rounds, see where I hit, figure out where I need to move my little tiny adjustment screws for windage and elevation, but I want those windage and elevation adjustments to be straight up and down and left and right. If I was to sight in the rifle this way, then when I need to make an adjustment, it's very difficult to make a correct adjustment because I'm not adjusting up and down, left and right anymore because this optic is now canted. So instead, I just treat it as if I was shooting the rifle, canted over at 45 degrees. This is basically the position the rifle's going to be in when this dot gets shot anyway, right? So I'm going to sight it in like this. It makes my adjustments a lot easier. And then the only thing I have to worry about is the mechanical offset of the center line of this window versus where the barrel is. At the distances that I'm shooting this backup sight at, it doesn't really matter that much. So this is how I prefer to zero in a backup 45-degree offset dot. Guys, that's it for this video. Soon we'll be doing more reticle wars. I'm going to show you MOA, MRAD or Milradian, and BDC reticles, what they do best, what their limitations are, how the math works. I'm going to go through all that stuff and make it easy for you to understand. So make sure you like and subscribe so you can see those videos when they pop. I'm really looking forward to doing them. Until then, hit the range, get some training, and I'll see you around.